Good evening and welcome to another edition of Down to the Wire. I'm your host, derbyologist, and joining me as co-host Candace Hare from Capping with Candace. Candace, this week we took a couple of races from Indiana on their big day. It's the Indiana Derby, and this year it's in the summertime. And then we also took a couple of races from Delaware Park, which I don't think we've been there before, but it's a beautiful track. They've got a nice card assembled and really some horses that are going to be we're going to be seeing this fall on some of these big days and possibly the Breeders' Cup. And I thought we'd kind of take a look at this Hockenson Stakes because some pretty big names are entered in this field and some long-term goals maybe in store for some of these horses.
It's an interesting race with some classy sprinters, I would say. I think, we always say pace makes the race, but I think pace clearly is going to dictate this field. A horse who's going to take a fair bit of money, I think, who I'm very against in this field is Bourbon Courage. I think he's going to be very pace compromised in here with his kind of come from behind closing style. Don't think he's going to get the pace to run into in this spot. So at a short price, he's a horse who I won't be using on any of my tickets. When I looked at this race, it very quickly came down to two horses, probably the two stars of this field, Fast Anna and Stalwalking Dude. Stalwalking Dude's your favorite on the morning line. Has run very, very well this year up in New York predominantly, won a few times in a row at Aqueduct and comes in here off a couple placings. Most recently was third behind Private Zone and clearly now in the Belmont Sprint. So, pretty quick turnaround here, but he ran a very nice race in there. I mean, you're never going to beat Private Zone when he's out in front on an uncontested lead like he was there. So I don't think that was any sort of a bad effort. It was a good race for him to take to this spot, and he gets the slight cutback from 7 furlongs to 6 furlongs here, which is much more his trip, I think. So he's probably the one to beat in this spot, but I'm going to go with Fast Anna. I just think this is a horse who, in this race, really has a distinct pace advantage. He's just faster than these horses out of the gate. And I think he's going to be left alone on an uncontested lead. And a very fast horse like him on an uncontested lead is a dangerous thing. The 6 furlongs maybe is a little bit of it's the furthest he probably wants to. I do think inherently he's a little bit better at 5, 5.5. But he does well enough over 6. He's won over 6, so it's not like he can't do it. I just think, he comes in here with several bullet works. He looks to be on his game. So I think he's the one to be in the spot, even if the morning line doesn't reflect it. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up going off your post-time favorite. Big weekend perhaps for his dam, Dreaming Nevada, with him here in this race. And then Dreamologist, who's also one of hers, debuts at Del Mar as well. So big weekend for that mare, and I think Fast Anna takes this one.
I like the approach they're taking with Fast Anna. This is kind of the Caitlyn Jenner of horses. It's a colt, but it's got a Fast Anna name, so it's confusing for horse players. But Fast Anna, they put her on the turf, him on the turf the last time, and he was bet down hard, especially really late in the betting at Gulfstream. And during the summer, that Gulfstream turf course plays a lot more like just a hard, fast dirt course. So that doesn't bother me. I think it was just a good prep. He's got the natural speed. I think he's going to get bet down pretty hard. I do agree, Stalwalking Dude actually ran a credible race chasing the Lone Speed Private Zone the last time and now dropping back to 6 furlongs. I think Fast Anna is going to be favored, and I'm taking a couple of horses second just because I agree with you. Bourbon Courage really only has – everybody's trying to go back to that Breeders' Cup race where he won the Gallop Out, but he didn't win the race, and he was out of it early, and I think that's more the outlier of all of his efforts. So I really like Purple Leg and Heaven's Runway. Heaven's Runway is kind of a horse for course, and I like the cutback for him, and I think he, from the rail there, he kind of just sits a good spot, and I think he could be second, or Purple Leg, who kind of goes in and out with good races. But I think Fast Anna could be meant for some bigger things, possibly even at Saratoga or a return trip to the Breeders' Cup. So Fast Anna for me, straight exactas over Purple Leg and Heaven's Runway.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up Heaven's Runway because he's another one whose form has been flattered fairly recently. His last race he finished second to Doc Almond. And I thought Doc Almond ran a very, very credible second over 7 furlongs last time out at Belmont behind a Lone Speed Classy Class out front. you're never going to catch a horse like that out front, and he came from pretty well out of it actually. So I thought he ran a very nice race there, and I think that flatters Heaven's Runway in this sort of a spot. So it'll be interesting to see how he factors at a big price. Like you say, this might be a type of a race to maybe pick one of Fast Anna or Stalwalk and do it. For me, that'd be Fast Anna, and then try to key him on top of a couple exactas and trifectas with some price horses in here.
Should be a pretty fast race, and I think if, the winner of the race, or a couple of them, may go back to Saratoga or Belmont Fall Meet and could maybe race their way into the Breeders' Cup Sprint or somewhere on one of those two race days. The next race we're going to take a look at Delaware is the Delaware Handicap. What's interesting about this race, it's one of the few races for older fillies and mares that is 10 furlongs, and it's still a handicap. And this year I thought it drew a pretty even field. Stop Charging Maria was kind of pointing forward, but now they decided to wait for the Personal Ensign. So I think it ended up making for a better betting race. And I think there's some nice horses in here that you can make a case for on a couple of different angles.
There are. I mean, for me, for one, it's very interesting now having these horses come in here who just ran in the Fleur-de-Lis Day at Churchill Downs, which was on the infamous Stephen Foster, very, very, very speed bias friendly track. So I'm going to try to use that to my advantage here with the playback. I'm going to be playing America in this spot. That she actually ran a very nice race given the circumstances there. She hopped at the start, was well out of it early, about 13 lengths back on that track. That was just absolutely no chance. And she closed very fast. On the track, from the 3/4 pole to the finish, she was the fastest of everybody by far. 3/10 faster than Tiz Windy, who was the next fastest. So for her to make up that sort of ground over that track, I thought was impressive, because just absolutely nobody was closing that day at all. America's kind of a nifty horse. She doesn't win a lot, but she's kind of honest. She usually kind of gives the same effort. She's been a little bit off form this year, I think mostly because she's had some issues at the starts of her races and has found herself further back than has been typical of her, but that was never the case for her up to this point. So even if she's had a little bit of trouble the last two races with that, I'm willing to give her a chance, because she ran a whole lot more races before that without having issues on that front. I do think the 1.25 miles is going to really play to her advantage too. She's just kind of a gritty, grinding type that, you know, she just wears them down and somehow finds her way into some of these races. The weights also favors her a little bit here. Last time out, she carried 118 pounds, which was more than what Frivolous, who won the race, carried. Only 2 pounds less than what Sheer Drama carried there. So she comes in a little bit more of a favorable spot weights-wise as well. So I'm going to go with America. I think that she's kind of the playback out of that Fleur-de-Lis race.
Yeah, both my opinions in the Delaware Handicap and the Indiana Derby are based 100% on the track surface on June 13th at Churchill Downs, which was entirely speed biased and inside speed biased. And not to say that Frivolous isn't capable of some big efforts, but she really dug down and really took advantage of a speed-friendly surface that night. Sheer Drama, I think, is probably overall maybe a little bit better than Frivolous. I got it down to a couple of horses. I really like Joint Return's prep race. It was totally a prep. Ran in the Obia Stakes and kind of came running late, but really had no chance. The winner kind of opened up by 3.5 lengths on the turn at 18-1, kind of surprised everybody. And I thought Joint Return kind of just ran her race, and I think she's another one like America that America's my second choice. I just want a horse that can go 10 furlongs here, and I just don't see Frivolous going 10. Sheer Drama is questionable at 10, and I think in this race maybe it's more suited for the tortoise rather than the hare, and just a horse that can keep on grinding and plugging away. But I think the ultimate bet against is Frivolous. And another horse I want to mention a little bit is, I have no idea what Rosalind's doing in here. Her only win on a non-turf surface was at the Ashland Stakes, and that was back when Keeneland was synthetic, but maybe just 10 furlongs, and it's not a lot of grade 1 star quality. So it's kind of interesting that Rosalind's in here, because she's not, class-wise, she actually does have some classy races. Just surface and dirt is kind of the issue.
Yeah, I wonder if this is more distance than anything why we see her in this spot. I also want to mention, because again, from that circus last time out, it's a bit deceiving because the race held together, but they went very, very fast early in that race. So I wouldn't even be surprised. I mean, Frivolous was right up on the pace. Sheer Drama was very close up to that pace too. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we see a little bit of a meltdown here because they went very fast. We just didn't see the repercussions of that because of how that track was playing.
Yeah, they're definitely, the jockeys picked up on it halfway through the course because there were some horses being pushed towards the tail end of that card that never had really shown speed before, and we'll talk about them in some other races. So I'm going with Joint Return, 8-9 to 1. I think America is definitely usable. I think her morning line was like 15 to 1, but I think we have a shot at maybe at a price in that race, and it's a win and you're in. So either way, it's going to be have Breeders' Cup repercussions.
Yep, I think it's going to be one of those sneaky races that we'll look back and see that perhaps the form held a little bit better than people expected.
We go to Indiana and a couple of back-to-back races, the Indiana Oaks and the Indiana Derby, and we've kind of taken a look at some of these big day race cards across America, and this time we go to Indiana. Now, last year you were there for this night, but it was in October and it was cold.
Yeah.
Now it's in mid-July, and I thought, again, two competitive races that really gives you lots of different handicapping puzzles to take a look at.
It does. I'm glad for them. I think that they got some really nice, full fields and competitive fields that I know when I was there last year, they threw a very nice card all together. And I thought they did the same thing this year, which is good because you never know when you change a date how things are going to shake out that first year. So I'm glad for them. Starting with the Indiana Oaks, big field here, which I'm glad to see. Um, it's tough because I really want to bet a price in here, but I'm going with Odd Chocolate. I've been a fan of her since her first race. Last time out, I bet her in the Black Eyed Susan, and she had zero chance. They went very, very slow out front, as we know, with Keen Pauline winning that race. Odd Chocolate jumped at the start and then found herself, in a fair amount of traffic. And I think at points she really kind of struggled a bit with the kickback that day. It wasn't until she was pulled out 3 wide that she really did, I think, her best running, but they went so slow, nobody was going to catch Keen Pauline that day. Obviously not bad form now since then, having finished second just in front of her was Include Betty, who of course has now won the Mother Goose. So, a good enough race altogether. I think, that was only her 3rd race to date. I think that was very much a learning experience for her, and I thought she ran a sneaky good race here. She'll be your favorite in this race. I don't see any way that she wouldn't be. So it's a little tough. For me, I think I'm going to just single her in spots. That's kind of probably the way to play this sort of a race. So, Odd Chocolate for me.
I got it down pretty quickly. I actually like 4 or 5 horses in this race, and I have them all in various forms of my stable mail for different reasons that I'd like to play in different spots. And actually, none of them really fit the spots that I was ideally looking for them. So my stable males will still stay intact because none of these horses are really back in a spot that I really like them. But I was impressed with Pangburn. I really thought she got motoring late in the Iowa Oaks against Sarah Sis, who was just kind of allowed an easy lead that night. And Sweetgrass came rolling late as well, but I wasn't as impressed with his effort. I thought she kind of waited a little bit too long. Didn't like her stride after the wire or the gallop out. I was a lot more impressed with Pangburn. So of those two, I guess I like Pangburn, but I ended up going with Ocean Wave just because I think she comes out of a classier race. That Acorn Stakes is going to cause a lot of troubles because there was so many trip troubles in that race. And some horses went in there with bad form, and Carolina's got potential, but she hasn't really, we didn't really know what she had, and she broke slow in that race and still won it. We've seen some horses come out of there and win, so I'm hoping Ocean Wave kind of maybe takes advantage of the rail and the drop in class and, hints back at some of those Oaklawn races because I still was majorly impressed with those 2 Oaklawn races this spring, and I just think she's got a big race in her. And I'm just hoping maybe it's this weekend and 5 or 6 to 1, maybe the price to try to cash in on her. Hot Chocolate is definitely capable of winning the race. And Tiger Ride is kind of interesting. I wanted to bring her up just because She's ran 4 lifetime races, 3 of them, 5 lifetime races, 4 of them on the turf. But her one dirt race was a neck loss at Churchill Downs last November in her second lifetime start. And she was 8-1 that day and just barely lost. But she's kind of got that same nick as Shared Belief, Candy Ride over Stormcat. I think this is really a dirt pedigree, and they've been, I'm not sure why they've been running on all those turf races, but I remember I played her in that race, in the dirt race, when she lost in her second lifetime start, and I just kind of like the turf to dirt angles. Sometimes they wake up going dirt to turf, and sometimes they wake up the other way. So I think maybe the nick is meant more for the dirt, and this may be the spot they're kind of pointing for, and I think she's going to be a price as well.
Yeah, and in the turf races she's been running in, it wasn't like they're bad races. We haven't seen her since she was 2, but her last race was the Appalachian. Of course, Lady Eli won that over Miss Temple City, Sunset Glow, and you're the one I love. So hardly running against bad horses there by any means. And like you say, that same Share Belief nick with the Candy Ride of Stormcat will be interesting to see how it goes on dirt. Probably more of a shame than anything that there aren't that many synthetic races for this horse to run on, because that might have ultimately been its best surface. I mean, I agree with you on the notion that Ocean Wave comes out of potentially a stronger race. I think Carolina was very, very impressive in that Acorn, and we've already seen Calamity Kate come out of that race to win at Delaware. I think a great Delaware. So that's a race that's already kind of starting to show itself as a nice, strong form race. I'm a fan of Ocean Wave as a horse. I've been on her a few times. I was on her in the Kentucky Oaks, where she finished faster than everybody else. I just think she really needs a setup. Obviously, she's kind of a horse who comes from the clouds, and I'm not entirely sure she's going to get that here. High Dollar Woman has some speed, but I just don't see a lot of speed here. So I think Odd Chocolate just kind of sits a little bit of a better trip, kind of gets that box seat run just off the maiden speed.
Yeah, I think Pangburn is more likely just because she's got more tactical speed.
Yeah.
And I agree, Ocean Wave needs a setup, but every once in a while you get a meltdown. And if she gets a meltdown, I think she's capable of winning, but it's just finding the right race. So who knows, maybe this works as a nice tighten her up and they can stretch her back out in the Alabama or something, or keep her in the Midwest. So we'll see where she fits ultimately.
Yeah.
She may not be a grade 2 horse. She may just be kind of a pace-dependent grade 3 type, but we'll see. I mean, I think now I'd rather have her at 6 or 7-1 in this race than even play her at 7-5 in an allowance race or something, because I think she is pace dependent. I don't think she's in better than anybody in a weaker field. So might as well put her against better horses and see if she can get a price on her.
Yeah, I think Pangburn was really nice to see. I know both of you and I have liked her at times, and I think it was finally kind of seeing her put the pieces together, because she's had moments in races where you've seen that flash of talent, but really hadn't put that full race together in a while. And then on the Tiger Ride front, because you mentioned her in this race, she's also cross-entered Friday in a turf stakes race, so it'll be interesting to see where she ultimately ends up running.
Yeah, I mean, the Friday race is probably more logical. Maybe they just wanted to see how many horses entered this Indiana Oaks. So sometimes trainers play that game, but I think she may be live just in that other turf race just because of the horses she's faced, and she's actually run some good races. The Indiana Derby is going to wrap it up for this week's episode, and we get a lot of the same characters that we started back in January and February with on the road to the Derby, and really it's just a matter of whose turn is it this time maybe, or is Mr. Z ready to go on a long winning streak?
Oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that. No, I don't think Mr. Z is going on a long winning streak. That last race, I mean, I guess it depends on how you look at it. I fully believed going into the race that Divining Rod is a better horse than Mr. Z. I fully believed coming out of the race that Divining Rod is a better horse than Mr. Z. The thing was that Mr. Z was left alone on very slow fractions. I thought that, Julien Leperoux was riding Divining Rod. He obviously became aware, he sensed the pace that they're going very slow and they were going to let Mr. Z go. He went with a very, very premature, aggressive move to try to tackle him and win the race. I don't have a problem with that. To be honest, if you think you're on the best horse, I'd much rather have you be aggressive and try to win the race than be passive. If you had just sat there in third and let Mr. Z go. So I have no problem with how he rode the horse in the race. Obviously, it didn't work out. He lost. Not that it was by very much. And we have a new rider now on Dividing Rod, so I don't think we'll see a move like that again. But I do think that there's a fair bit more speed in this race. Tiz Shady brings some speed into here. He led last time out at Belmont Stakes and Allowance, and he tends to at least be close. He'll push, even if Mr. Z leads, he'll push Mr. Z to ensure that this is an honest pace. And maybe he's the only horse who I think here shows some speed. I know Island Town led last time out, but I think that was much more a case of the track than anything, because that was not normal from him, and I wouldn't expect him to be forward here. But if Tiz Shady can go up there, just kind of, what is like, passively harass Mr. Z. It's, anytime you have a front runner who is a little bit tenacious like Mr. Z, I always harken back to last year's Woodward with It's My Lucky Day Moreno. How It's My Lucky Day was ridden versus Moreno is exactly how you should combat any sort of a front runner like that. Just go up, make your presence felt, but don't engage them. Mr. Z does his best running when one horse engaged him, and we saw that when Divining Rod went up there and tried to go after him, aggressively. He put his head down and was like, "No, you're not passing me."
Because you don't pass Mr. Z.
Don't pass Mr. Z. What you need to do is go up there, make your presence felt. Don't actively engage the other horse, but passively harass the horse enough to wear him down throughout the going of the race. So I think Tiz Shady can be that kind of a presence for Mr. Z. I think Dividing Rod's just the better horse, and I think he's gonna win this race. I would be surprised if Mr. Z beat him again, because I thought Divining Rod in Lexington was one of the most impressive preps I've seen to this point. That prep came back extremely formful. Fame and Power has done nothing but run very, very well since then. Donworth has won since then as well. So that's a race that I thought nobody really has talked a lot about. That was a very nice win, and I just think, it was circumstances that beat Divining Rod that day, not that Mr. Z's a better horse. So I'm going Divining Rod here.
Again, my opinion is going to be formed off that June 13th Churchill Downs surface. Island Town was ridden. There was a perfect example. He'd never been on the lead in his life. The jockey saw the track was favoring speed. Kudos to him. I picked him that night. He went to the lead and dug in and took advantage of Fame and Power breaking slow. Sometimes, that's just the way it works out, but I don't think he was the best horse at all. And a lot of times, sometimes it works out that way. You can cash a ticket and know that you didn't have the best horse, and that's just the way it was that race. So I think he's a total bet against. I think, at 3-1, 7-2, I think he's going to run out of the money. I just think there's 4 or 5 horses better than him. Mm-hmm. I think Divining Rod clearly was better than Mr. Z the last time.
Yes.
But Mr. Z is the perfect example. Last time out, he was 7-1. That's the time you play Mr. Z. Now he's 2-1. You don't play him this time because the chances of him winning 2 races in a row is not very good. And there's lots of other subtle things too. Like last time out, nobody thought he could win, so they let him go to the lead.
Yes.
Last time out, he had the 8-hole. Now he gets the 1-hole. Like when you add all of those things together, it means he's less likely to win. But on the other hand, Mr. Z is also one of those horses where he's got a little bit of fight in him, so it's kind of hard to toss him because the clown's going to be in there in the fight on the turn. So he's kind of one of those horses where even if you don't play him in a pick 3 or you don't play him in a pick 4, the whole race you're going to be like, oh shit, there's Mr. Z, there's Mr. Z, and so he is going to run his race, but like I just want to point out, like this time, there's a lot of subtle little things working against him. Divining Rod made a move a little too soon the last time. Divining Rod gets a new jockey this time. Mr. Z was outside the last time. Now he's inside. Yes. Last time he was 7-1. Nobody concerned about Mr. Z. Now he's coming off a win. Everybody's going to look at Mr. Z. So I ended up going again with my theory on that June 13th surface. Bold Conquest. Now it fits a couple of patterns. He did face American Pharoah twice over the winter. Yeah, he never had a shot, but he was still facing a classy horse who wasn't going to lose those 2 days, and he didn't totally disgrace himself. He ran a very nice race to Fame and Power at Preakness, which I think Fame and Power was not going to lose at Pimlico that day. So that was just a very nice kind of race where he just kind of angled up. Then the last time out, if you noticed, the first call, he was 2 lengths out. The second call, he was 3 lengths out. The jockey tried to ride him for speed. He just didn't have it, and he ended up losing by 11 lengths. So this time I think he's going to lay back, go back to his one-run style, and I think he's in the money in this spot. So I'm picking him on the top, but I think you have to use him. And more than likely, Divining Rod may be the winner, but I think Bold Conquest is the perfect play in a race like this. He's going to float up to 12, 13 to 1. You throw out that last race, and there's 2, 3 reasons why you can use Bold Conquest in a lot of ways, and you can throw out Island Town because I think he's a bet against.
Yeah, I agree that Island Town's absolutely bet against. Bold Conquest is interesting. I gave him a look. I think he's a little bit one-paced, is my worry about him. So I think he needs them to go a little bit quick up front. He's just a little bit of a one-pace type for my liking. I don't even know if I'd want to take him all the way back. I think if you can run him 3, 4 lengths off, you probably give him his best chance to hit the board. Though I wouldn't be surprised if he hit the board. I think I'd just be more surprised if he won. Mr. Z, you made up the really good point here too that he breaks on the inside. I thought the 2 best races he's ran was last time out at Thistletown, and then I thought his Arkansas Derby when he made that big move up on American Pharoah, and even though he also didn't win the race, I thought that was an impressive move from him. Both of those happened on the outside of a horse, which is very different from having horses pressure you from the outside and being on that inside. I usually think it's tougher for horses just mentally to handle being pressured when they're down on the inside like that. So that's a good point that you bring up, that he will be in that sort of a spot now. I mean, what do we think of Far Right? I mean, I know he was a horse that I was never a huge fan of on the Derby Trail, but he was pretty popular at times. Everyone said he had Mr. Z's measure down there at Oaklawn Park. He seems like he's really fallen off the map now since then.
Well, I said it's the biggest rivalry in sports. It's the 6th time that Mr. Z and Far Right have faced each other now. And Mr. Z has won the last 2 times. I think Far Right is actually intriguing a little bit in this spot because he didn't run that last race. And just like you, yeah, I've never been a Far Right fan. I never really thought. But then I go back. There was a little bit of controversy the week of the Derby. A couple of the clockers said that Far Right wasn't working well, and the trainer scoffed it off, but he did not run a very good Derby. If you notice, he had slow workouts going into the Ohio Derby out of that race, and then all of a sudden his last 2 workouts, not bad for old, 47.4 and 4. Like, I just have a feeling he was in a funk there, and I think he's live in this spot. Now, do I think he can beat Divining Rod? No, but I think he's better than Island Town, and he's another one. He gets a jockey switch, and so I think he's kind of live here, and he's another one that all of a sudden now he was 7 to 1 the last race, and he can float up double that because everybody just kind of assumes that I think they're gonna let that last race override, and he just had too many good races. Even though I didn't necessarily like him in those spots, he's had too many good races to just be 15 to 1 against these horses. Like, none of these horses are that great.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the way to look at it. This is a race that, from top to bottom, I think maybe Divining Rod's a fair bit better than these. I do have hope for Divining Rod. I think he is a horse who, he's been a little bit more of a later developing type. He's taken some time to grow into himself and to really mature mentally. But I do always quite like these Tappets that seem to have their head straight, and he certainly is one of them. And I think there'll be bigger and better things to come from him. But aside from him, this is an extremely competitive field. From whether it's Mr. Z to Deliverance Day, I think, any of these, I wouldn't be shocked if they hit the board by any means. Even a horse like Tiz Shady, who I know made, a very nice impression on people in the Gotham, he's been a little bit of hit or miss, but he has some tactical speed. If he doesn't go up and actually, pressure Mr. Z, this could be some sort of a merry-go-round race where he could finish second.
Yeah, Tiz Shady, the only problem with him is I think he's kind of in that Mr. Z mode right now. It seems like he got that maiden win, and they just keep on throwing him in against monsters, and I think he'd been better served getting a non-winner as a 2. So again, like, he's another one that can run anywhere from 2nd to 5th. I just would, I like him more. I just think, some horses just need that second lifetime win. So I think it's going to be hard for him to get that second lifetime win in this spot. But you can make a case for him. And I agree with you. I think you got Divining Rod's a little better than him. I think the rest are all fairly even. I just think, just like last time, Mr. Z's odds went up to 7-1. Now Mr. Z is going to go down to 2 or 3-1, and I think Bold Conquest and Far Right are going to go up to that 10 to 12-1, and I think they're the horses to play this time, somewhere in that trifecta, superfecta, and Mr. Z may get trapped at the rail.
It may be interesting too. I know they've had a lot of rain at Indiana Downs, and I know there's, the weather forecast says there's a chance of rain, but this actually could be a really interesting race if it rains too. So many of these horses, Mr. Z arguably ran some of his best races in the rain. Divining Rod in the Preakness ran a huge race over the slop. Tiz Shady in that Gotham, that was over a muddy surface that he ran really well over. Far Right has the sloppy track wins. So if this actually ended up being, a wet track, it could be really interesting. Even Bold Conquest, I think, was third in the Rebel over a sloppy track. So we have a lot of mudders in here if we get some sort of, wet surface.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. It's going to be under the lights on Saturday night, and it's a good card. They've got the Schaefer, and there's some other good races on that card. So it's kind of during the summertime at night, and I think after the Focus, and it's not a major racing weekend. I think a lot of people are going to handicap it out, and then they'll play Saratoga and Del Mar during the day, and I think they'll get a nice handle that night. Because everybody's just going to win so much money at Del Mar and Saratoga that they're going to have to put that money down.
Got to bet it back.
So they got to bet it back at Indiana. So I think it should be a good card. It's always kind of a fun race to handicap, and I think it's just going to be interesting to see the tote board. I really see some horses floating up that they normally do, and I see Mr. Z being played a little bit off the win, and Divining Rod's another horse. I like him. I clearly thought he ran the best race the last time, but people seem to like this horse, so who knows? If he gets bet too far, I just don't think he's an 8-5 or 7-5 in this spot either. So you got to kind of just make an opinion on him and see what the projected double payoffs are, and if they're not good, I'll just go for a shot with Bold Conquest and see what I can get out of that angle.
Well, and I think those two in particular, Mr. Z and Divining Rod, could likely be a case of what types of bettors bet who. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Mr. Z is the favorite in the win betting, but that if Divining Rod was the favorite in pick threes, pick fours.
Yeah, so and I agree with that too. It seems like more the subtle nuances of Divining Rod is going to get picked up in some of those multi-race where people that just look at the form and betting the one race might bet Mr. Z just because he's coming off the win. But it was a head bob, so I think most people kind of see through that first third, but
maybe his consistency could be appealing to, more. I think the win wagers typically it's a little bit more novice money in there, and you'll see his consistency could be appealing to that. Whereas Divining Rod kind of comes off as a little more of that progressive type that I think people who bet the pick threes and pick fours tend to gravitate towards.
I think if Divining Rod wins, he could go to the Travers. I think they've waited long enough to try the big boys, and so I kind of hope he does win, because I think he could fit in that race, especially if Faro doesn't go. And I mean, I think he fits with the rest of those guys, and he could be, I think they purposely were patient, and I want to see where he fits with horses like Frosted and some of those other guys, because I don't think inherently, I think he's just as good as a horse like Japan, and I'm not sure he's, I mean, I think he fits in there besides everybody but Faro.
I think he fits, and I think unlike a lot of them, and something we tend to talk about a lot during the 3-year-old season is we like for horses who have a winning move, and he can win races, which is not every horse has that. And I'm not even sure a horse like Frosted has that. I mean, he's a horse who runs forward, but a lot of times he's a little bit one-paced. He needs it to kind of melt down in front of him, whereas Divining Rod, he can put in that slingshot move and win a race.
Should be an exciting card. Delaware's got a good card as well. We get to see if Normandy Invasion can finally go through that non-winners of 2 victory condition as well, and or maybe no, he didn't.
You didn't care about his last race, the resurgence of our caravan.
Yeah, so well, he skipped this race, so Normandy Invasion scared him away from this stakes race anyways. So But that's got actually a nice little field in there, some old familiar names. So Delaware and Indiana, definitely some fun cards to watch on Saturday. So next week, I'm sure we'll hit one of the two big, probably the Spa will be out too, and then maybe a race from Old Del Mar and try to find another turf race from somewhere. But that's going to do it for another edition of Down to